All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the last breakfast webinars of this semester. Before we begin, I just wanted to give you quick instructions. These are instructions you must have seen many, many times in the past year, I'm hoping. But I would like you to keep the microphone muted and your camera turned off until it's time for you to speak up and ask questions. And you can use the raise hand feature or the chat feature when we come to the discussion section. The speakers have asked me to let you know that it would be great if you can reserve all of your questions to the Q&A session after the presentations or to the discussion sessions. So they will present first and then you can start the discussion later. So today we are very happy to, no, before I begin with that, actually, I just need to do a quick plug-in. We have upcoming webinars. We are planning out new webinars for the next semester. So keep a lookout on the ITRL webpage. And we are also, we also post all of our previous recorded seminars onto our website. So you can also take a look at that. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Daniel Sjöström, Håkan Karlsson, and Yusak Susilo today to present the lessons learned from the self-driving buses in Barkarby from different perspectives. And we are happy to have Anna Pernestål moderating this seminar. The agenda looks as follows. First, Anna would give you a little bit of an opening perspective on the topic. And then each presenter would then have about 15 minutes to present, after which there's a very short Q&A session for 2 minutes that will follow for you to ask your questions immediately after, or you can keep your questions for the discussion session. And now, without further ado, Anna, I hand over to you.
Yes, great. Thank you very much for the introduction and setting the stage, Pavna. We are used to this now, and today I'm very happy to have Daniel Sjöström, Håkan Karlsson, and Yusak Susilo here to talk about world's most modern city traffic solution. And I think sometimes they will present their learnings from the pilot and the deployment of autonomous self-driving shuttles in Barkarby, which was the world's first, if I have everything right, the world's first self-driving vehicles in public transport on public streets. And that has, of course, gained a lot of interest, the self-driving vehicles. But I really would like to stress that this is so modern traffic solutions is so much more than only self-driving vehicles. It's also about getting the service right, get the right service in the right place, understand the users, and understand which solution fits in the city that we are, and also fits the users. So it's a match both between the users and the landscape and the urban structure that we have. Another thing that I think is very interesting with the Barkarby Staden is that the municipality had a really do have a long-term plan and vision about creating a livable city, but did not only start with building the city, but also started in parallel with building the city, also started with the mobility in the city, and so that those two are connected together. I think this project, I've had the opportunity to follow this project a little bit from the side, together with my colleagues at ITRL. And one thing that is striking in this project is that it is truly a collaboration between the municipality that, so say, owns the streets and care about the streets and the city, with the region and the public transport authority, and with public transport operator, Nobina, that we have here. So unfortunately, municipality of Järfälla could not join us today, but they have really been a part of this collaboration project also. And then we as academians from KTH and other universities had the opportunity to join the project and contribute with learning and creating knowledge from different perspectives from this modern transport solution. Yeah, but I will not talk more now. Enjoy and see the learnings from world's most modern traffic solution. And with that, I hand over to Daniel Sjöström, business developer at Nobina, and Håkan Karlsson, business developer at the Region Stockholm.
Thank you, Anna. Very nice to be here and to be able to mention and discuss a few things within this area where we actually think we have made a difference. We're going to, as Anna said, talk a little about all the things that actually was done in this project, but of course specifically a little bit about the autonomous buses and shuttles. In the end, we also will talk about the results that we have been able to manage and to measure during these times, so you see the actual impact on this. But to start with, just a short information where we are for those who doesn't know that and why. Barkarby Staden is located 15 kilometers northwest of Stockholm Center, Järfälla municipality. It's a really big building area. During about 20 years, they will build about 1,000 apartments per year in average. When this area is done, so to say, there will be about 40,000 residents, 10,000 workplaces, schools, shops, sports, culture, and all that within an area about 2 square kilometers. For others to compare in Stockholm, that's the same dense that we have around the Odenplan, for example. It's a really interesting area for many reasons. But that was just one of the reasons. The second reason was actually from my perspective, representing public transport, was to also be here with public transport from the beginning. Actually, usually public transport comes after a while due to rules and numbers counting on how many people it's necessary to be able to run buses or things like that, which means that the area is built and then after a while public transport usually comes. We wanted to change that to see what it meant if you actually made people having the availability already from the beginning. But also in the area, the municipality Järfälla was really interested in doing something together with us. And also the operator, Nobina, we have contracted in the area, was also really interested, which meant that we thought that this really could make change, not just end up in discussions. And of course, for the long run, in 2026 or 2027, something, the metro will open in this area. Of course, that investment will also make better value if people already are used to go by public transport. So there are many things and many reasons to why we choose this area. However, the most important thing actually maybe when we summarize this was the setup, the cooperation between 3 parties, the region where public transport is, the municipality, Järfälla, and the operator, as I mentioned. And to really set off this, we started with an agreement with 9 areas of development that everyone was able to communicate, and the highest ranked politician in the region and the municipality and the CEO of Nobina signed. So agreed to really make sure that this would happen. Of those 9 areas, we will go through some of them, but here is where the autonomous actually was mentioned from the first time. 2 points actually on these were for autonomous shuttles and buses in different versions.
Thank you, Håkan. Well, as Håkan said, we pretty much set out this adventure with a letter of intent signed. There was a kind of political direction we wanted to take. So then with the letter of intent signed, we need to organize us to make this happen for the task ahead. So basically what we had a steering committee, we had product management, and then obviously we had 6 different boxes for kind of sub-projects we wanted to move into. We're going to go through a few of them today. Obviously the autonomous buses, that's one of the big projects. We also had one project for bus rapid transport, BRT as we say, and also one for mobility as a service. Obviously one for communication, and another one who's really been helpful in this project is co-financing. A lot of things we have done in this project hasn't been able to done without the help from co-financing from other parties. So that's been, and also obviously with the kind of the rapid movement happening in Barkarby, we also need to have a more traditional way of looking at traffic planning for basically providing services for the inhabitants in Barkarby. One thing that's, as Håkan said, is throughout this project, each and every box and each and every decision we made in 3 parts. It's not been kind of hidden agenda by one party. We always has had the PTA, the municipality, and us from the operator sitting in the same room, making decisions together for the best of the interest of the public transport. So that's been a key factor. And obviously we have had a lot of help from the academia, from KTH, ITRL, and VT, looking at different perspective of what we have done and what we are doing in Barkarby. Can move on, Håkan. So obviously one of the big things we have done and we are doing is the autonomous shuttle bus. As Anna said, basically when we started this up, this was the first kind of autonomous public transport system in the world. We have a host on board. Basically, that's where we are right now with the technical side and also legislation side. We are definitely moving in the direction of making these buses 100% driverless. But the kind of host on board right now is more or less just when there is an issue, then the bus has a solution for it. The kind of driver or the operator on board has to help the bus make the decision, so to say. But these are 100% autonomous. There's regular SL ticket price. So basically you can look at in the app, and there's the line 549. It's just one of the other regular red SL buses around in the region. But obviously it is very special because with this project and being able to kind of advance with the technology and the legislation, we can really learn where the future is heading and where this project will be a good fit for the future. So it's a great chance to see people's acceptance on where to kind of have these products in the future. We can move on, Håkan. So basically where we are right now, we are, as we speak, have moved on to look in on demand. And I mean, on demand has been kind of a buzzword around our business for a few years, but I think what's really cool when it comes on demand on autonomous buses is basically the end customer, the kind of the passenger wants to go from A to B. He makes a decision in his telephone. And then there's other people who basically make their decision, and then that is a data flow coming up, and then there's this optimization system, and then it gives the bus the direction to go from A to B to pick up somebody. So the whole kind of flow is 100% integrated within the data from the end user who wants a ride, and then the bus who makes the decision. Okay, I'm gonna go to pick up the end user. So I think the combination of moving to 100% autonomous buses and also be able to add on demand is opening up a great possibility for this product for the future, when we obviously can add speed, we can add reliability, and we can by the end of the day obviously take off the driver. That's where the kind of where the big breaking point will come in the future for this product. I think it's really important for us as a business to look at where to adopt this. Should it be in a city center area? Should it be out in the kind of lower dense area, out in the kind of where there's not many inhabitants and so on. So that's where we are learning by being so being able to test this product so early. And I think we are learning a lot of that. We can move on.
Thank you, Daniel. By respect of time, of course, we will go through the other parts very briefly and shortly, so we have time for the results also. But just mentioning, bus rapid transit or bus rapid transport was launched in August 2020. On the Swedish level of probability, it was really high level. We managed to get the time for transport very close to what it actually takes by car. And when we did that, we also did it by new technology, by having fully electrical buses that charge in the depot during the night. We made also on nearly, not all, but big part of the stretch, we also had made separate bus lanes, and we made it by different solutions through intersections and on streets with pretty simple solutions to make it feasible also in an environment where we actually already had built parts and some parts were not built. To be able to do this in several locations within Stockholm if successful. Another part of the project, Mobility as a Service, we launched that in September 2019 under the brand of Travis. Travel planner, of course, showing public transport, electric scooters, bikes, carpool, taxi, and walking, and also giving different informations about the different alternatives. It took time in the start, but now it's really successful. Last month, actually, we sold about 70,000 tickets by this channel in SL, still through the COVID pandemic times. It's really good, really interesting. Yeah, Daniel.
Thank you. One of the great things I think about this project has been the attention we have received. I mean, it's all about showing the positive things about public transport. Public transport doesn't need to be boring. It can be really in the forefront of innovation and all the cool stuff. So basically, we have had, politicians, journalists, visitors throughout the world. I myself had the transport minister of Morocco. We had the guys from the Senate in the States. We had people from the government of Australia and so on, being able to be here and see where this integrated kind of working together has taken us. And just looking at 2019, we summarize that we had 108 positive articles throughout the world about all the cool things we're doing in Barkarby. So it's been really great interest. And I think also on a national side to show for other regions that if we work together, we can really push and make a great effort. We can move on, Håkan. So obviously one thing that you can't forget is, even though you add kind of innovations things, when we have something that Barkarby started is really kind of moving in this rapid speed, I think it's really important to be able to also provide a kind of baseline for the bus and the public transport. That's by the end of the day the kind of the offer we are having for the inhabitants in this region. So that's also been a kind of something we really need to attempt to be able to as the city grows, we need to provide a better public transport route for the inhabitants. And also, I mean, we had a letter of intent. We set out a few goals, and as we are right now, I would say all of our indicators, all our goals are green as we go. They are done, or we are, kind of ongoing with them. They are moving in the right direction. We obviously need to work with them through it because this is a moving material. But all the we will show in the kind of the pages ahead a little interesting things we have found throughout the project.
One thing is car ownership, actually. The mass service is one of them that's meant to affect this, and comparing the area of Barkarby with other areas of Järfälla, or for that reason other areas similar located. The ownership is clearly lower than it usually is, both in Järfälla and comparing. If I look into these figures for other parts of Stockholm, it's just a few areas within really central part of Stockholm that are on the same level for the first car, and for the second car that's really low. How many households use that? That's really exceptional, and I think that's one of the effects for this reason, a really good effect. One other thing is when we look into customer satisfaction, it is good. It is much higher than before. But what's really interesting is that the youngest people, when we make this research, is the most positive for public transport in this area. And that's never has happened before. It's always the youngest that are more negative about it, and the oldest that are more positive. So that's really interesting, and I would say that depends on both the new technology part of this project and of course the communication part of the project.
Great. Throughout this project, we have 4 kind of main goals to move through, and I think personally, I think I'm really happy with the first one. It's like we went in with the market share of public transport 45%. That is 2015. Before Corona, we had a market share of 67% in the Barkarby. So basically, we have moved from a kind of a situation where people had cars that they don't really need to have the car, because we have provided them with a public transport system that they can choose. So they don't need to, maybe even the first car, but they definitely don't need a second car. So that's great. Also, we have raised the customer satisfaction with the kind of bus solution we have. 2016, we had 66% giving thumbs up to the kind of public transport. Now we have 76%, so that's also another great figures. Also, we are taking market share. We are increasing the kind of the transport, the kind of travels made twice the rate of the inhabitants moving in. So with each and every people moving in, we are more and more building our market share. So that's great. As we said before, we are already we are still building the city, and we are building a city where people don't need to depend on car. They can because there's a reliable public transport system built in the city. And also we have satisfaction with the public transport situation in the area. There's obviously area that is still growing. It's will be problems when the area is growing in this rapid pace. But obviously we have great numbers also there, that people, the inhabitants, are more and more happy with the kind of the traffic situations in this area, and less cars in the streets obviously make something to that number. Thanks.
Just to clarify there, this last figure was for the overall traffic situation, not only for public transport. Thank you very much. Just leaving you before questions and discussions with the figure. During this project, the bus line 549 has been driven 70,000 kilometers in autonomous mode, giving us a really good information about to take care of for the future. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Håkan and Daniel. Do we have any urgent questions for Håkan or Daniel now? Otherwise, Yusak, I suggest you get prepared.
Right. I will share my screen if
Yes,
nobody wants to ask the questions. After Håkan and Daniel describing the general pictures and the operations of this automated bus operations, route 549. Basically, I will talk a little bit about the user. So what we as the team from ITRL actually have done in understanding in particular the user behavior. It's not only my work, it's Anna's work, it's Gia's work, it's Mia's work. So it's pretty much the whole team. And if you're interested, this is the list of the publications of the work that we have done, or you just drop me email, then I can just send it to you. When we actually working with the users, basically we're actually doing two different things. So the one is the one that I'm going to talk after this is more on the market analysis, understanding the behavior. And the other thing is there's also another piece of work, so strength of work that we work together with Nobina as well. Try to do a little bit of simulations, try to optimize the operational characteristic of the bus. So Eric and Elias and Jonas and the team actually also working on that. Just drop me email if you're interested on that, then I can point to the right work. So as mentioned by Håkan and also Daniel, there's so many different values that actually this work has been provided, very unique values, not only in the real public transport setting, which can actually enable us to do a real interactions between road users, but then also the long-term deployment. And this is thanks to these three parties, long-term collaborations. It just kind of shows this kind of inventory works that we also contributing to the Austria Tech. Just been launched a few months ago to kind of map what has been done in Europe. There have been tons of deployment of automated bus, but I believe on the Barkarby deployment is very unique. It's one of the longest and one of the most comprehensive one. And also it's a keep growing city, so it's actually kind of a perfect living lab if you really want to actually deploy a behavioral experiment. So why this longitudinal or long-term collaboration is super important is by the end of the day, we are deploying new technology and people are continuously learning and changing. So even just opening a new tram line, Håkan probably can share, but a new demand it's never been a real demand because people just get curious, they just want to actually have a look on it. But then once you die out after 2-3 months, then you can actually get the real demand. And this is what really important when you actually start to estimate demand and also the wider impact of this kind of technology. Just a side note, because we're actually able to do this long-term deployment analysis, what we actually did is we also do these hazard models, like a duration models, try to predict how long people actually wait until they actually try to do this automated bus. And we shows that all these traditional variables that we use is actually insignificant. It mostly shows that in the beginning, in the early weeks, all these people just try for fun, for random reasons that basically unexplained by traditional model. That's kind of highlight the importance of long-term studies. So the settings that we have is basically we have this three-wave surveys. A panel survey means that we approach people, the same people, 3 times. So by end of the third wave, we're hoping to actually have 500, a group of 500 people. So it's basically to make sure that there's enough people at the end. So at the first wave, we actually have 800. The second wave, we still have 600. And on the third wave, we still have almost 500. And in these questionnaires, we kind of learning about socioeconomics, the changing of their habits, the changing of their attitudes, preference, etc., and also the business model and willingness to pay. This is just kind of shows that how even after almost a year, people still do learn. And this is the proportions of people that, the number of people that still take the bus for the first time. So even after a year, people actually still haven't really tried, and this is the first time they're actually taking up. And what interesting also to shows how the awareness actually keep increasing between waves, and also the participations of taking the bus as a daily use also increasing. That said, when you actually talk about the adjustment of the responses, what we see is that whilst in the first wave they're quite cautious, on the second wave they kind of excited, but then on the third wave they start to put everything in the framework, in the sense that it's not the respondents were not as excited or as the second wave. But it's not bad, but it's just the average is just goes a little bit, become, rather than really excited, become like, okay, it's good. So given that we actually have a longitudinal studies, we can also kind of start understanding the changing of people behavior and adoption rate along the time goes. For example, we just want to know what factors that differentiates between adopters or potential adopters or non-adopters, or just people don't really want to take it even after a year, because people have a free choice. So what we found is that whether people will adopt that or not is not necessarily related with, once we control with all the attitudes, etc., it's not really related with all the socio-demographic characteristics like age, gender, or income, but more on about three things. So the first one is about safety perception. So the non-adopters are the one who are actually much more skeptic. Once you actually have enough trust to the system, you are the one who actually jump from non-adopters to potential adopters and adopters over time. At the same time, people who actually have no car or doesn't have a car, they're actually the one who actually jump forward easier. That said, like any other else in the world, once you actually can progress, you can also regress, in the sense that when people actually start to move from non-adopters become potential adopters or adopters, the one that actually pull them back is the disappointment. So once you're actually being in front of something that actually not really match with your expectations, then you actually, the persons will then becoming more resent than previous stage. So, and this kind of highlight that we actually have to be careful on what we actually promise to public. Otherwise, once they try and they get disappointment, it would be more difficult for them to actually get on board later on. Another thing is we also have an opportunity to compare between among these people who actually have been exposed to the technology for more than a year, their kind of preference and behavior in terms of choice behavior between automated and regular bus. In short, basically what we could say is that the automated bus passengers or these technology adopters, they are actually much more elastic in terms against the level of service. For example, if you are using a regular bus, public transport, and there is a delay of 1 or 2 minutes, you probably will not be as agitated as if the automated bus actually late for exactly the same amount of time. In terms of the speed, there is no differences at all. Automated bus users, they're less concerned of bus lane, but then of course, probably they don't really see that, they less see as less relevant compared if they actually use the big buses. And automated bus is less appealing for work trips, longer trips. And in particular, if they travel alone, weather and time of day is not significant. Lastly, we also kind of work with Nobina colleague, try to identify which market that actually works. So we actually see how this service can be operated differently. So what we actually have a look is that what kind of variables are actually important for commuters. For example, like frequency, perception of time, and safety and information is important for commuters. But then for the one who actually use this for shopping and family journeys, like the frequency and safety and pleasant experience are actually the one more important. And what's interesting is that to actually see the relations between this. So if you actually want to see the market analysis and packaging the service, then you should actually see how these different markets actually link to each other. For example, the one who use or likely to use this for the shopping trips would also like to use this for the family and leisure trips. Then the other analysis that we actually do is also try to see how the previous experience influenced the decisions or the following wave, and the decision of the following wave influence the reflections of the next following waves. So and this we actually use like a sequential structural equation modeling to actually see, for example, if he or she had a bad experience in early months, how this would actually impact the acceptance in the following months, etc. What we could say, of course, we can actually share to you with a very detailed analysis, but then everything is methods and everything is dynamics. For example, at least for our case, we found that in general, people actually found in the first wave, they actually found it's a better information. So it's actually, they're pretty happy about it, they're quite pleased. But then once they actually start using it, they actually found that the level of comfort is actually less than a regular bus. And this is actually that actually put people's satisfaction a little bit down. And then they also kind of start to reflect that probably frequency on time is also not really good. So in particular of this case study, what we could talk about this kind of service design, we would suggest that how then we can actually improve the comfort at least as equal as the current public transport comfort, and also improve the frequency. Nevertheless, our users are still learning and adjusting, so it's basically highlighted the importance of design thinking in delivering the service. Take home message. So basically what we would like to say is that based on this longitudinal observations, we see that the values and behavior change over time, and also the trigger factors, what kind of make them to actually adopt the service. But then as for now, the tipping point, what actually make people adopt the service or not is depend on three things, which is the safety, car ownerships, and ability to cope or avoiding disappointment against their own expectations or the user's own expectations. And for the operators, probably it's also important to know that these automated bus users, they are much more touchy. They are much more elastic compared with the regular bus users. Thus, it's very important to actually keep the level of service pretty consistent and pretty high over time. And just before I close, the other thing that we also do is we also do analyze LiDAR analysis, which the analysis actually shown in here. We just basically what people on the other road users actually react. And there are some users that actually react much more. For example, when they cross the street and there's actually the bus, they actually cross the street faster. With that, I actually just close the presentation and thank you for your attentions.
Wow, super interesting, Yusak, and a lot of learnings from from the users. So with that, it's time to open up for questions for the speakers. So please raise, if you want to put a question, please raise your hand or write the question in the chat. I think maybe Bamna, you need to help me and see if there are any raised hands.
Yeah.
Yes. But while waiting on that, I would like to begin with asking you, maybe Håkan and Daniel, but I think Yusak also has some input, might have some inputs on this. So what we see, I think it was really impressive numbers when we look at car ownership and in Barkarby staden, and also impressive numbers looking at users of the service. But the numbers that we saw were from pre-COVID. It was November 2019, if I remember right. So what would you say are the impacts of COVID? Will it recover? How has it been during COVID period, and will it recover? What do you think?
Whether it will recover might be really difficult to answer, of course. But one short thing I should mention is that During the COVID period, the numbers in Barkarby has decreased less actually than it has in other areas. We have better figures actually during COVID.
I would say throughout SL traffic, we have pretty much halved the market share, and looking at the kind of the bus traffic in the whole area out in Barkarby, and there's pretty much, as we speak, minus 40% bus ridership. So obviously there is a new playground, and I think the $1 million question, that's maybe for another forum, is how fast will the kind of will people come back to the public transport products going forward? But obviously what we have built in Barkarby is we have provided a great platform for them to be able to come back, I would say.
Yes, and we also have a related question in the chat here. How many were allowed in the automated bus during the pandemic?
Well, I think it's there was registration for 2, I think. There was actually a period initially for pretty much a year ago where we actually shut down the kind of service for a period, just because obviously the actual bus is smaller, and there's just one door and so on. We can't manage the traffic flow in the same way. But as later in the I think it started off after the summer, we opened up the autonomous bus again, and obviously we had to have we can't have maximum passenger on board.
And I guess the related question is, were the buses crowded before, or is this limitation in number of passengers really impacting the number of passengers?
Well, I think there's obviously been times where we can't take on more passenger, definitely. Then obviously I think the main kind of the main experience we are with the autonomous buses is learning. This is pretty pilot products. The speed is not where we like them to be. The kind of Barkarby and kind of the people are still, you know, kind of, we're still building the city. People are still moving in. So I think the main kind of the main takeaway is to learn where we will implement autonomous buses on demand system going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Regarding, I see a question on speed there. We started at maximum speeds about 11 to 12 kilometers. Now we are at 18, so it's still low, but it's improving. But the most important thing is also the average speed. In the beginning, there was a lot of stops for many reasons. Some we didn't be able to explain actually, but that's a much more smoother drive today also. But still, there is a long way, I would say, to come before this is a really good solution for the passenger.
Mm. Yeah, and I think it's also very interesting to look, as you say, look at the buses. They are here, but that can be a bad thing in the pandemic, but it could also potentially be a good thing that there are not so many people mixing in the same place. So it's very interesting component in public transport post COVID, for sure. Yes, we have a lot of questions coming in here, so that's great. I pick one. Another question related to the actual trials. Do you have had any accidents with pedestrians or with let's say dead material?
Obviously not any major, I would say. That's obviously a combination of that we are having very strict kind of security measurements, as Håkan said, regarding speed, regarding decision that the autonomous system can make, and so on. So not any big issues. I think one of the, obviously we have such strict kind of rules for the autonomous system. So one of the things, as Håkan mentioned, the kind of the stops that was pretty hard before was because the system did panic. Okay, something is in the street, and then there was, what was it on the street? Maybe it was a bird or car park, double parking, and so on. So that is, as technology moves on, we can kind of smoothen that and make give more decision to the actual the system on the bus to make better decision and make the ride smoother. But thankfully, no big accidents.
No big accidents. Great. And so if we look a little bit again to the future, we have a question here from Mikael Jönsson. What changes do you anticipate or hope for when the metro system starts operating in 2026?
Well, what we have said throughout, I mean, it's in the kind of the three-part vision we have going forward is when the metro comes, the kind of city is halfway built, and we are planning for obviously the end of when the city is built out in Barkarby. We see a future if the technology is in place, if the legislation is in place to have autonomous system. We have kind of built this in layers. We also have the mobility as a service at Travis, where we want to attract micro mobility, for example, e-scooters, and make people car sharing and so on. So building the kind of transport system, mobility system in different layers with the subway, with the BRT, with regular buses, with autonomous on-demand buses, and also the kind of micro mobility added to that. So hopefully we're going forward building a city with less dependent on cars.
We see that the bus rapid transport, for example, that now are the extension of the metro actually that will be still used by in another direction. Maybe going from Skärholmen through Barkarbystaden up to Sollentuna, for example, but more as a regional bus, and of course maybe having this autonomous shuttles in the streets where the main street isn't for a big bus actually, going around in the area and taking people to the metro stations, more or less.
Have you already started to look at taking this concept with or parts of the concept that we're trying in Barkarby to take that to other places?
Depending on which part you mean, the cooperation part of it, we are starting up with in other places to try to take all the benefits for working in this way, since it seems that we make good results in a fairly short time comparing to what's usual in this area. About the autonomous part, there are two things, of course. We would like to see big buses, of course, but they haven't been available in the market yet. And for the small buses, we would like to take them to the countryside, where we actually would think that they will make a real benefit to take people to and from the bus stops on the May country road. However, the technology that we see today doesn't be able to drive on those kind of roads, and of course it doesn't be sufficient with the 18 kilometers speed, of course. So the technology needs to develop a little further.
Obviously, we as an operator have a kind of looking into this throughout Nordic where we are operating. But I think together with SL and so on, I think there's interesting places where you can add to that. But I think, I mean, looking back at where we are right now, we said, okay, autonomous driving. If I look at where people, I think the general people thought we would have been today, going a few years ago, I think everybody thought there was autonomous. So the kind of the speed hasn't really been there. But I think it's really important that we are kind of in the forefront of where we are, because one of the days it's going to be, and then we can take out the driver from the equation with control centers and so on. And then, as Håkan said, I mean, looking at less dense areas, I think would be really interesting. Looking at smaller kind of suburb areas and so on, and kind of add new business models for the autonomous on-demand system. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, a question to you, Yusak. So if our friends here plan to take this to other places from the learnings that you and the researchers have from in the project, do you have a message or advice or comment to them if they want to bring this solution to another place or parts of the solutions?
Lessons to whom? Because I think in many ways, yes, this is a public transport vehicles, but then at the same time, it also carries a new technology and it's bring a different way to operate. So I think in many ways, it would be a different lessons for the operators, new lessons for the operators, new lessons also for the stakeholders, and also for the planners in general. So for example, I believe, as been mentioned by Håkan and Daniel, there have been a lot of things that has been done or have been learned during deployment in Barkarby. But then at the same time, I believe also the manufacturers learns a lot. When we would like to actually deploy this, in particular from the user perspective, when we actually would like to deploy this in other places, it also depends on the existing public transport demand that we would like to use, in the sense that we found a different trait, for example, different socio-demographic, and also different trip purpose, in the sense that in what kind of trip purpose that people would like to use. Then this would actually need to be matched with the demand. Otherwise, then if there is some mismatch, then probably we can't really do this. And some things that we didn't actually present today is that how then we actually implement this in a simulations and also in a higher level of system dynamic analysis of such system that can actually positively or negatively impact the travel and also the society in general. But based on those tools, then we can always pretest and see whether there is enough markets to actually deploy the technology.
It's both about the users and the operators and the city. So based on a question from the chat here, based on the learnings from this project, are there any specific places where autonomous buses are more suitable than others?
From my perspective, I think it's autonomous buses will obviously come in different sizes and shapes. Obviously now we are testing the small shuttle bus, and going forward, I think that might be they have a ability to move in further into they obviously electric. They're really small, so suburb areas and so on. I have this vision, you know, there's the kids playing football every Wednesday evening. Okay, so the kind of the moms or dads in that suburb area, the bus can come and collect the kids. Maybe that shouldn't be part of the kind of public transport kind of ownership from Trafikförvaltningen, but I definitely think that's where we can see this in the future. And obviously out in the suburbs or in the countryside, where we can actually take out because then we can have a kind of advantage when it comes to the cost side. And obviously, I think the bigger autonomous bus, if we can build, for example, BRT infrastructure, we can have really high speed autonomous buses, for example, in the kind of Stomlinje we are planning for the region and so on. So I think different sizes and different shapes. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I agree. And also the benefit of having them autonomous and maybe the smaller ones is that you also can add public transport to areas where streets are too narrow to go by big buses, and also by times of day when the demand is so low, so we can't afford to go by public transport. This will probably increase those possibilities also.
I think I'm sorry, Yusak. Just one thing I think that's really we don't look at so much when we talk about autonomous buses. If you look at from an operator side and public transport in general, I think one of the big bottleneck for autonomous is, or as the public today is, we talk about the dynamic timetables and so on. And to be able to have dynamic timetables that today the bus is going in this from A to B, tomorrow it's going from A to C. It's back because when there is drivers involved, when there's people involved, they need to know, okay, am I working today, tomorrow, where do I? So in the future, we can have autonomous, I think, with technology, machine learning, AI, and so on, an autonomous system, we can pretty much on a kind of on the fly create the kind of the kind of service for the demand that's out there. So I think that will be a key factor going forward for autonomous.
Just to add what Daniel said, that is basically we are in a very early stage, and the technology itself is not yet being used as it full most capability that it may actually can do. For example, we can just easily think, yes, just put somewhere in the suburbs for the first and last mile, but then definitely, as Håkan and Daniel have demonstrated, that it can be on demand, it can be in the dynamic deployment that we don't have. Another thing is the infrastructure. So by the end of the day, it is just a vehicles in an urban space. So how then we can actually provide the urban space that actually have a support, have designed to actually support the given vehicles. So if yes, it's actually slow, of course, people may tend to say, just put it in the pedestrian roads, but then because in the pedestrian roads, there's so many people actually crossing the street, the vehicle will always move slower because of the safety reasons. So in that sense, the way we design the city, the way that we design and allocate urban space also need to be visited. And putting also in rural is also a good thing, but then at the same time, learning from our experience here in Austria, when we actually put the bus in rural, in the middle of nowhere, the bus actually have difficulties to actually identify itself where it is. And given that, at least in Austria, we actually, in the Alpen, we actually have this hilly terrain, the bus also somehow struggle in cope with some certain situations. So, especially in the snow. So in that sense, different places is also give or bring different challenges, and the solution is not only how we operate the bus, but then also the infrastructure surrounding it and regulations surrounding it.
Yeah, and just a final question before there are a few more questions in the chat. So if you can please, if you have the time afterwards, Håkan, Daniel, and look at that. But I would just like to end this session with asking you, Yusak, and take this opportunity. You were a little bit into that already, because now you are in Austria, and we did this project in Sweden. And you have mentioned some differences. We talked about the terrain, etc. But yeah, are there other what would you say are the main differences, and maybe in particular was ending where we started in this more collaboration? If you have in particular any comment on that collaboration between multiple organizations.
I think the biggest win of these collaborations between stakeholders is that, and some things that I'm being proud of to be part with, is we are not cheating through a sandbox regulations. There are tons and tons of deployment. They actually, even in Austria, we actually go using the sandbox regulations. Means that once the real operator want to operate this, everybody's still kind of scratching their heads how to actually deploy this. So in that sense, that's actually a big win that this project has been achieved. And also the long-term deployment, whilst even in Austria, we just have a few months or few weeks deployment here and there, this MMiB actually have achieved. On the other hand, I also see other places like in the Netherlands and also in Austria, because they don't actually able to operate as we are in Sweden, they put more emphasis in developing the technology. For example, the connectivity between the vehicles with the traffic lights, and also all these kind of background simulations that the operators and the authorities capabilities needs to be upgraded on. So this is what many things that like the Dutch and also the Austrians actually have to do probably more than what we have done in this project.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Håkan, Yusak, and Daniel for sharing your experiences. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And with that, I hand over back to Vanna.
Yes, thanks everybody for joining us. And I just want to remind you again that we will post this seminar recorded onto our website and on our social media platforms as well. So make sure you follow us. And yeah, I think that's about it. And if there are any other questions, we welcome you to contact our speakers and our moderator so that you can get some follow-up answers. But yeah, I think this is it. Final breakfast webinar of the semester. And we'll see you next semester now.